I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Abe Karar, and I am a partner at Fintech Galaxy. And we are very privileged today to be hosting this Ask Me Anything session with an esteemed panel. We have the panelists, Yasmeen Al-Sharaf, the head of the Fintech and Innovation Unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain. We have Frank van Praat, the head of Trusted Analytics, AI and Control at KPMG Holland. We have Fahim Shafiqi, the Chief Risk Officer at BisB. And we have Osama Ali Nasr, the Nasr, Chief Information Officer at BisB. And of course, we have our moderator, Maisa, Shunnar, the Chief Digital Officer. And today's topic is really about focusing on big data and AI in consumer banking. Now, before I pass it on to our panel and to Maisa, I'd just like to quickly go through some of the key dates so everybody is on the same page. So we started off the challenge kickoff back on October 20th, and that's when we kicked off the registration, and we opened it up for all the interested mature and enterprise-ready fintechs. December 28th, by the end of this month, we will have the deadline for the submission, and the Fintech Galaxy team will start screening, and we will shortlist 10 of those fintechs. Right after New Year, on January 3rd, we will have round one of shortlisting. So we'll take the 10 shortlisted fintechs, and we will go through a virtual one-on-one pitch with Bahrain Islamic Bank, and after which the list will go down to 5 selected fintechs. On January 5th, we will announce the finalists, the 5 finalists that would have been selected by BisB to be part of the final pitch competition. And then on January 10th, we have the final pitch competition and we announce the winners. And as you may know, Fintech Galaxy performs this in a virtual pitching in front of judging panel, and the judges will go through the scoring, really following the 6 main criteria: technology, innovation, relevancy, feasibility, presentation, and data, and then we'll announce the winners after the judges' assessment. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Maisa Shunnar, our moderator from Bahrain Islamic Bank, the Chief Digital Officer, to take it away with our panelists and to start this Ask Me Anything session. Maisa, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Abe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome everybody to the session. We at BisB are very thankful to the Central Bank of Bahrain and are very excited to be part of the CBB Digital Lab. This is a very supportive and collaborative approach by our regulator. We are indeed very lucky to have a regulator who is not waiting for the technology to evolve in order to regulate it. Our CBB is an enabler and is indeed the biggest supporter to the financial institutions, fintechs, for the benefit of the customers of Bahrain. So allow me to shift to my colleague, Ms. Yasmeen Al-Sharaf, who is the head of the fintech unit in CBB, to ask her to provide us with an overview on the FinHub 973 and the future ecosystem that this will be sort of the marketplace for the banks and the fintechs. Yasmeen, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Maisa. A very good evening to everyone joining us today, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel, along with a host of very esteemed panelists. Just to give a quick overview in the beginning of FinHub 973. So the whole idea of FinHub 973 is to operate as a centralized digital innovation platform. It's going to be the first of its kind in the region, which is driven and overseen by a financial regulator. This platform has been a result of a direct strategic partnership between ourselves and between Fintech Galaxy, which is the technology partner and the enabler to provide this platform and to bring it to life, along with a host of other strategic partners comprising of financial institutions such as Bahrain Islamic Bank, Bank ABC, the Bahrain EDB, Benefit, ABC Bank, MBB, and Illa Bank. I hope I didn't forget anyone. The platform, of course, as Maisa briefly mentioned, it's going to be an innovation lab. It's going to have a number of different features. The main features that FinHub 973 revolves around is, first of all, it's going to have an AI-driven marketplace, which is going to be an open-source AI-driven marketplace, bringing together fintechs from around the world in direct contact with banks and financial institutions in Bahrain and the region. This will enable banks to easily source fintechs and to partner with them and to come up with different use cases with them. The second feature of the FinHub 973 is going to be a technical testing sandbox, which will provide our banks and our fintechs with more than 300 open APIs to test out different use cases, technical use cases. So banks will essentially be able to partner and collaborate with fintechs to come up with different ideas, use cases, to develop the prototypes, to test out the solutions, and to even move on to commercialization. The third stream of FinHub 973 is going to be the Central Bank of Bahrain's regulatory sandbox, which is up and running today. So starting from the beginning of next year, any new fintech company will be able to apply to the CBB's regulatory sandbox directly through FinHub 973. It can then complete its testing on the digital lab with full supervision from the CBB on the lab. Finally, the platform is also going to provide an open banking stream, which will enable all our banks in Bahrain to easily comply with the newly issued Bahrain Open Banking Framework, allowing them to use the platform as their testing or sandbox facility. Although these are the current or existing features that we have in place for FinHub 973, I would just like to note that we're continuing to work very closely with FinTech Galaxy and our other strategic partners to develop more features for FinHub 973. So FinHub 973 will develop, it's going to evolve with time, and we're going to be for sure adding more features as we go down the journey and learn the needs from the market as well. So this is a quick brief overview of FinHub 973.
Thank you very much, Yasmeen. I'm sure everyone has seen the number of financial institutions and the partnership between them and different fintechs. As a matter of fact, just recently, MasterCard, they have partnered with about dozens of Asian fintechs, and so have Visa. They just actually partnered with Ethereum Digital Dollar startup that raised about $271 million so far. We know that the primary two reasons for the financial institutions to partner up with the fintechs is first is develop solution for the underserved population and for the financial inclusions, and second, to fill in gaps within their own capabilities. So let me get some context from our Chief Risk Officer, Mr. Shafiqi, about the sought solution at Bahrain Islamic Bank and what is its intended value proposition. So Fahim, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Maisa. So happy to be here. So as far as I'm the CRO here, and I pretty much define myself as like the end user or maybe the customer. So what we've seen typically in the fintech world so far is we've seen a lot of solutions when it comes down to payments. We've seen solutions when it comes to branch services. What we haven't seen is something related to one of our core revenue streams, which is the act of lending. So one of the major areas where banks make money and customers require their financing needs is the provision of loans. So in essence, we are looking for a way to find a way to collect the data that we need to make our lending decisions quicker. And this may involve static data that is held on the part of the customer, as well as data that we take from external sources like the credit bureau. We also want to see, in terms of how we are seeing the market evolve and buying patterns change, how could we use non-traditional forms of data to identify new market segments and also to be predictors of customer default and customer behavior. And the key element here is how can this be customized to the environment we have here in Bahrain? because we have seen a lot of talk about what happens in the UK and the US, but we want to see how do we adapt it here. And lastly, we want to see how could we use AI or machine learning to analyze our portfolio behavior, to give us an insight into emerging trends, emerging issues, and emerging risk themes. So that in its essence is how I would define the problem, Maisa.
Thank you very much, Fahim. And before we get to our expert, Mr. Van Praat from KPMG Holland, I'd like to get some insights from our Chief Information Officer, Mr. Nasr. Can you please provide us with some insights on how does this fit with your planning for your digital agenda and the innovation stream that you are managing?
Thank you, Asma. Thank you, Maisa. Hi, everyone. So, Maisa, we want to build a big database AI technology platform for our credit scoring. We want to create a customer decision hub inside BisB, and maybe at later stage we want to create this customer decision hub maybe across Bahrain. What we are looking today, we need something to be built inside BisB. To be capable to analyze customer data and give us an instant assessment, so we can get, we can approve whatever credit cards application or finance for our customers. We are not looking for just a traditional risk assessment tool or platform. We are looking for a tool built based on AI and machine learning technology. The inputs for this tool could be credit bureau, as Fahim said, from benefits maybe, customer details and transaction history in other banks through leveraging and using the open banking technology. Some data might be extracted from social media. This kind of data will be unstructured, so the tool needs to be, to store this data in a structured way. And also the tool should use internal data from BisB and learning systems. And also it might also be connected to some external parties. Yes, to enable the tool to make quick decisions. The output that we are expecting from a tool can be divided into 3 sections: data management to store data and process this data, risk assessment scores, management also to store the scores that the tool will give, and then pass it to an integrated APIs with our system and our channels. Again, this tool can be also can be more advanced by using maybe some sentiment analysis and maybe fraud risk preventions. The tool also needs to analyze and understand the customer behavior during the customer journey inside BisB, and also maybe the tool needs to be embedded inside our digital services, again to capture some important data about the customer behavior. And that's it, I believe. Overall, the objective of this solution to simplify our customer journey, to take the most accurate risk decisions on spot, to reduce risk, eliminate the workload, eliminate paper maybe, and we want also to increase managing the credit scoring and approving process to be more efficient and more effective.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Osama. I'd like to turn to Mr. Van Praat. Mr. Van Praat, we know that the artificial intelligence and machine learning using deep data analytics are at the peak, and they are at the technologies on demand as we speak. As an expert in the field, can you tell us about the challenges and risks of the solution, taking into consideration the recently released PTPL, which is something equivalent to the GDPR one of Europe? So over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today. Indeed, so I'm based in the Netherlands, in Holland, and we are part of Europe, and we over here I have the GDPR, the data protection, personal data protection legislation for privacy purposes here in the European countries. And as I understand, and also done some research, the PDPL, the privacy legislation in Bahrain, is quite similar, actually very similar to the GDPR here in Europe. And if we look at how AI systems are developed, then the GDPR and the PDPL actually have quite some specific rules or guidelines on what is allowed and not. And you can easily make a distinction between two key items, so to say. So the first would be everything that has to do with actually the data. So obviously, as indicated already by previous speakers as well, is that data is one of the crucial items to develop AI systems. And the PDPL actually set some quite strict legislation on what is allowed with data, yes and no. And the other thing, which is maybe a bit less obvious, but which is also part of the PDPL as well as the GDPR in relation to artificial intelligence, is that everything that has to do with automated decision making. Because if you're using artificial intelligence to take over certain pieces of your business as part of, for example, a process to determine if someone is creditworthy, yes or no, then it could potentially mean that it would fall in the bucket of automated decision making. So it's not a human being anymore making a decision, but it's now a computer. And the PDPL, as well as GDPR, indicate quite some strict guidelines on what are the requirements when you are aiming to do so. So today, at least in this short piece of the panel, I wanted to explain a bit more on those two items and what this legislations indicates about it. So first, if you look at data, then obviously, as indicated, AI is built based on lots amount of data, especially historical data. But with the introduction of the PDPL, it's now far more important. You're not allowed to use all the data that you have just because you have it, right? The PDPL strictly indicates that you need to have certain legitimate grounds. So you need to have processing grounds in order to use the data. And if you have all the historical data collected in the past few years, well, you don't have that specific legitimate grounds, then you're not allowed to use that data anymore for developing AI solutions. So it's very important that you only use the data that you have legal legitimate grounds for. Which means that, for example, you collected it to execute a certain contract with a client, or you just got consent from a client or a consumer to actually use their data for the purposes that you are intended for. But also, if you collected it in historical times, then that consent, for example, is not sufficient anymore for the data that you have, because the consent is always specifically for a purpose that you have to describe specifically. And if you haven't done so, then your consumer, the client, in most cases didn't give specific consent for it, and that makes it more difficult to use that data. One of the other challenges, if you look at the data, using data for artificial intelligence in relation to the PDPL, is that the PDPL strives towards data minimization, which means that you only allow to collect the data that you need to have for specific purposes. So it's not allowed anymore to just collect personal data for whatever reason. You really need to have a specific reason to collect the data. Obviously, you can use data, big data from other sources, as long as it's not personal data. But specifically, if you want to grant loans, then of course it's also very important to look at the personal characteristics of of a potential client, and then you need to have that personal data as well. And then the PDPL restricts you quite deep on this, which makes it a bigger challenge. And obviously there are solutions for this. So what you could do is retrospectively get that consent for the clients that you want to use the data for. But then that might come across quite weird, obviously, because then you're indicating, okay, we want to build advanced algorithms, artificial intelligence, and we have collected data from you 10 years ago, for example, and we want to get consent to use that data to build an algorithm, artificial intelligence solution. And of course, it might come across a bit weird. So what you could also do as a potential solution is pseudonymize or anonymize the data. So you can use the historical data, but then you transform it in a way that it's not personal sensitive data anymore, and then you're allowed to build a big data artificial intelligence solution on it. But obviously, to actually do that anonymization could be quite a challenge, but that could also be a potential solution. Another solution to cover that collection of data challenge is to use other types of artificial intelligence where not so much data is required. If you think, for example, of a machine learning technique, which is called reinforcement learning, then the need to use all that historical data is a bit less required. So you can also look at different technologies in the field of AI that you can still build new type of advanced solutions in the field of AI, but you don't need to use the actual historical data to build them, and they can actually be better than the traditional way of working as well. So that's everything that has to do, and that everything it goes far beyond this. But in a short overview, this is what the PDPL says about data in relation to artificial intelligence. But as I indicated, it's not only about data collection and the data usage; it's also about automated decision making, which means that you are transferring decisions from human beings towards algorithms to computers. And there, the PDPL indicates that it's quite important that you are able to give the consumer in this specific scenario an explanation why, in this case, if you talk about loans, why a certain loan was, for example, denied. As if you're not able to explain how an algorithm, an artificial intelligence algorithm, came to its conclusion, then it's not allowed by law, so to say. So you need to be able to explain to someone, to the potential client, why the loan was denied, else you're not in compliance with this legislation. And also what you need to consider is that it's not, you cannot force someone to be part of the automated processing. So there always needs to be a way out for the potential client to also be exposed to just human processing. So it's not allowed to force someone only in the direction of the computer. It's also important that you give them another option, that they don't need to do automated processing. If you're not doing that, then you're also not applying to the PDPL legislation. So if you want to looking for specific ways to deal with the challenges, then one of the obvious things to do is that you are only using technologies in the field of AI that you actually can explain. So if you're thinking, for example, about deep learning, one specific technology in the field of artificial intelligence, the critical characteristic of such technology is that it's very difficult to explain how a certain outcome was created. And obviously, if you want to use that technology and also comply to the PDPL, that would be a big challenge, because as said, the deep learning technology does not allow you to actually get the explanation how a certain outcome is derived. So then, if you still want to comply, then you need to look for other technologies to use. And one other thing which is pretty crucial if you want to implement these solutions, or to build these solutions, is that you really think about who is accountable in the end. So there always needs to be a certain owner in the company that is ultimately responsible for the decisions that are made with the algorithm, especially if you want to give your potential clients also a way out of the algorithm, and also another way to be assessed for a certain loan in this specific example. And therefore, it's very important to define ownership in the company that is using the algorithm, so that the client itself has someone to speak up to, who is typically then the owner of the process, for example, and therefore also the artificial intelligence solution itself. So those are two of the, and obviously there are much more to say about this legislation, but I think you would require a whole day to go through it. But if you look at it on a high level, those two items are quite crucial to take into account when you want to build AI solutions. So one would be everything that has to do with the collection and the usage of data, and the other one would be everything that has to do with automated decision making. And I would really encourage you to go into too much and a bit more detail about the PDPL and look for those specific requirements, because else you would end up with a solution that is not allowed by law, and that would be obviously very, very unfortunate.
Thank you. Actually, very, very insightful. I can tell that you definitely love your topic. You're talking with lots of passion. So thank you. There is a lot to learn, and probably there will be more questions. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask Yasmeen if she can comment on the PTPL and you know, the privacy issues in light of the fintech and the different verticals of technology that are being adopted by different banks.
I think Maisa, the move towards a data-driven economy around, you know, is really driving this privacy issue or the personal privacy security matter forward. And we're seeing that governments around the world are starting to pay more attention to personal data privacy matters, as well as financial regulators. And as you mentioned earlier, and as I believe Frank mentioned earlier, like we at the Central Bank of Bahrain take this issue very, very seriously, and actually at a government level in Bahrain, and that is the reason why we've issued our personal data protection law, the PDPL, which is quite similar to the UK's GDPR in many instances and senses. As a financial regulator, of course, we're very technology agnostic. So we don't really focus on the type of technology, but what we do focus on is the nature of the financial service that is being provided or undertaken. And we pay close attention, and we hold all our licensees liable to have extremely well-tested measures in place to protect the privacy and confidentiality of their consumers' data. We've revised nearly all of our rule books at the Central Bank of Bahrain, and today most of our rules and regulations refer back to the different provisions of the PDPL law. For example, open banking is a great example that I can speak about. We do refer to the PDPL a lot throughout the open banking regulations, and we hold our licensees liable to ensure that no personal data is shared with a third party without receiving the prior consent from the consumer. From a different angle, we also require our licensees to embed in place internal security parameters to protect against different cyber crimes, for example, hacking, that may expose data, either the bank's data or the customer's data, to criminals. And you know, in today's world of evolving technology, hackers and cyber criminals are always one step ahead of us regulators. And therefore, it's very important for both us as financial regulators as well as the financial institutions. First of all, as a regulator, we have to continuously develop our rules and regulations in a manner that ensures effective cyber security in place, efficient data protection provisions are in place. And on a different angle, we need to ensure that our financial institutions have internal safeguards, for example, having security officers, having adequate security protocols that will prevent cyber hacks and criminal activity taking place. So yes, data privacy is very important, especially in today's technology-driven world and data-driven world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Yasmeen. I guess back to you, Abe. Maybe we can just start receiving questions for the panelists.
Yes, thank you so much. And I just want to take a moment to say, like, this has been quite insightful. Again, everybody on the panel has been sharing some incredible insights, and you know, Maisa, to your point also, Frank, and how you speak with so much passion, very informative. So we do have a question that's coming in from Hitinder Bawani. So Hitinder, if you want to just unmute your mic and ask the question, and just specify to whom you would like to direct the question, and we'll take it from there.
Hello.
There you are.
Yeah, hi. You guys can hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. Right. So I would want to direct I have two questions. The first one goes to Frank. So if we are processing data anonymously and it's coming from two different companies, and and the data is being processed completely anonymously, or maybe it'll be very difficult for any third party to actually take the data and identify the end user. So what kind of impact it will have on a startup that is probably involved in this kind of business activity?
So just a short clarification question in between. What do you mean with impact on the startup? What do you?
No, I mean to say, I'm working on a middleware data network that will actually process data between banks and third parties. So it's more like a financial analytics solution that we're working on, which will convert lots of end user data and then provide it to the banks. Now, in this case, what level of compatibility do we have to do with the PDPL or the EDPR kind of compliances that are in place?
Yeah, I would think fully, to be honest. So
okay.
I know from experience that it's very difficult to anonymize data fully, because at some level there will always be a possibility to re-identify the individual that is part of that data, because there are certain correlations that will eventually end up still being able to pinpoint one individual. But if you have but there are technologies to deal with that issue, definitely. And if you are a company that knows how to do it, and you can also how do you say, show it to the, for example, regulator, how you done it, then I think you are perfectly okay. But from experience, I know that it can be difficult to anonymize data to a level that it's actually not possible to re-identify to certain individuals. Or the other option would be to get the specific consent retrospectively, so to say, so that you could actually use the data for the purposes that you want to use it for, or to leave out the specific personal attributes of the individuals from the data. But then I think that would be still resulting in data that is not up to the quality that is required to actually build those the artificial intelligence solutions.
Right. Thank you, Frank. Now I have another question, which goes to Yasmeen from CBB. Right. So the question I have is, now we will be looking at the data that will be coming from end users, and then it will be processed and sent on to the banks for various analytic purposes. Now we want to understand. I was going through the sandbox regulations, and we have plenty of regulations there. We have a lot of things to do. So what kind of framework CBB is putting in place to help startups graduate from these kind of programs? Because I mean, we have seen things like there are reports that needs to be submitted, and then we have code reviews that needs to be done, and then we have some level of compliances that we have to follow. Obviously, I'm speaking for myself. Being a techie and a person who knows how to build solutions, I'm not so great at compliances or getting, getting done with the reports and things like that. So do we have any kind of framework or a ecosystem that is being positioned to help startups or to help individuals come up and actually be able to deliver the solutions? Because there are plenty of great ideas, but what we're lacking is an ecosystem that actually enable these startups or individuals to deliver on these ideas or to come up with these great solutions.
Okay, let me just start by saying, as a financial regulator, right? What we do is we regulate the financial sector. We ensure that we have appropriate regulations, up-to-date regulations. At the same time, with fintech, which is one of our top priorities at the Central Bank of Bahrain, we ensure that our regulations don't stifle innovation, that we allow for calculated, reasonable innovation, of course, without compromising the risks that come along with these innovations, and by having the necessary mitigants in place. When you speak about like what we provide as a regulator, you mentioned the regulatory sandbox, and that is a great starting point for any startup that wants to test out their solution within the Kingdom of Bahrain or from the Kingdom of Bahrain. The regulatory sandbox basically exempts those startups from having to comply with a host of different regulations that we usually ask or we impose on fully fledged licensees at the Central Bank of Bahrain. For instance, we don't require any capital requirements. We don't have any requirements when it comes to different prudential reporting, capital adequacy. So all these requirements are exempted from any company that enters into the regulatory sandbox. It's a very flexible environment in terms of regulatory requirements, and it provides startups the ability to, effectively test out their solutions with volunteer customers within a dedicated time frame. If we speak about the wider ecosystem, at the end of the day, just before getting to that point, actually, at the end of the day, as a regulator, it's still a huge responsibility for us that, once a startup is ready to graduate from the sandbox, we have to ensure that startup is able to, in the future, comply with the central bank's regulations going forward. And in order for us to complete this due diligence, it's important that we ask for these different reports to be made to the regulator at the end of the sandbox graduation period, as well as like the monthly update reports that we ask for. Now, speaking about the wider ecosystem, the good thing about Bahrain, Bahrain is very small. It's a small community, and we have great working relationships with other governmental agencies as well as private entities in Bahrain. And we work in a very agile manner in Bahrain to help startups like yourself and what we like to call as the Team Bahrain approach. So throughout our Team Bahrain approach, we interact a lot with different governmental agencies. For example, the Bahrain Economic Development Board, the EDB. We've got great working close relationships with the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Tourism to assist, in issuing the CR requirements for startups. We have, great collaborations with Bahrain Fintech Bay, for example, if a startup requires a hot desk in Bahrain. As well as other collaborations with other government agencies, as well as collaborations with the private sector, such as banks and other financial institutions to assist those startups. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, almost. Thank you very much I do agree with most of what you said. I was able to get my CR in less than 2 weeks. BISB has been an amazing bank. They issued my bank account within 1 week's time. And I'm here in Bahrain Fintech
Excellent.
Bay. Yeah, you guys are great. You guys are great.
You.
I went through so many banks. You guys are the only one who could do it in under a week's time. I am here already in Bahrain Fintech Bay. I'm a resident here for almost 1.5 months now. All of that is great. But now the challenge, hopefully this is the last question I have. Now the challenge is getting myself regulated by CBB. So you said that the regulation is very simple. So if you don't mind me asking, in last 1 year, let's say, so how many companies like us, where 1 or 2 people have been working on a fintech idea or an open banking idea, how many would have graduated? Because reports and all those things, do we have a list of agencies or companies we can approach who would be able to build these reports at a cost-effective cost-effective pricing? Because going to a code review, I checked out, and somebody's charging 5,000 dinar. That's enough money for a startup to sustain for 1 year in a country like Bahrain. So do we have anything like that, like a list of companies or some kind of partnerships? Like you mentioned, we already have MYC and other. Do we have others which
just speaking
would
about
enable
the costs and the expenses? Okay, trust me on this. If you do like a cost comparative study, you will find out that Bahrain is more cost efficient than other regional countries to do business for startups. That's number one. Number two, as a regulator, we're also a more kind of friendly, collaborative regulator. We do not maintain a list of the different consultant companies that fintechs or startups can deal with, because, as our role as a regulator, that goes against the essence of us being like, an independent authority, and we cannot engage in that kind of recommendations because that will be biased. So we don't. However, as I mentioned before, if you reach out, for example, to our partners, the Bahrain EDB or the Startup Bahrain community, they will be able to support you and help you going forward.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. I've been in Bahrain for 15 years, and I just decided to start things here because I believe Bahrain is a great place to start off any startup in the region, and that's the reason that we decided to start our startup here in Bahrain and nowhere else.
That's fantastic.
Thank
and
you
I
very much.
also urge you to.
Thank you so much, Hartinder. We have the next question from Ali Hassan Javaid.
I think Yasmeen was still saying.
Unmute yourself.
Sorry, Abe. I was just going to mention that I also urge you to check out FinHub 973 because that's a huge opportunity for startups as well.
I'm checking that out. Thank you very much.
Ali Hassan, there you are.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Wow, perfect. Okay, guys, everyone, hi, my name is Ali Hassan Javaid, and I'm from UK. So my question is for first for Frank, obviously, and second for Yasmeen. So to Frank, I mean, since you were talking about the GDPR, right? So like I'm in Europe, right? So we know we all have to be GDPR compliant to start any fintech or a microbank, right? So like in Bahrain, if we need to start a microbank or like a fintech startup, right? So if we want to make money outside from Bahrain, right? So how you see this compliance? Like what things I should need for that? In order to complete the compliance process, what things I should need to have it in my firm to make sure that I'm fully compliant with that?
So you mean that you want to operate in different countries and you still want to be compliant? Yeah. So this can be very specific, but you can follow different approaches as a company. But maybe one of the most interesting one would be to you can do two things, I think, on a high level. So one of the things would be just to comply to the local legislation. So if you're processing data in Bahrain, then you comply to the PDPL. If you want to process data in the UK, then it would be GDPR. What you could also do is to make it a bit more easy, is to create so-called global binding rules. I think that's by heart how they sound, what their name is. And that means that you, as a company, restrict yourself to stick to the GDPR rules also in the processing of data in other countries, which means that you as a company comply to the GDPR laws also when you're processing data abroad. But I don't know by heart how that, if the PDPL also allows that. If so, then it would be sufficient, I think, to process the data in both countries. If that answers your question, I'm not fully sure if I understand it fully. If you need clarification, let me know.
Right. That was my question actually. That
okay.
I was thinking that if I for example, I'm gonna running my startup in Bahrain, right? And if my customers are sending money to UK, to USA, so should I need to be compliant with every country's regulation? I mean, or is that some kind of like top of that, I can go with that and I can read off anything, or have to go one by one with every regulator? I have to fill that.
So therefore you have the solution of the global binding rules. I think that's the, I'm not fully sure how they are called, but I think that's it. So global binding rules, which means that if you as a company could, if the other country agrees with it, and that's I think now pretty much the case, because the GDPR is the strictest privacy law there is. So for pretty much all the countries, it's already good. So if you indicate, me as a company, I comply to global binding rules, to the GDPR across all the countries that I'm operating in, then you should be okay. But to be honest, not the real expert on this, specifically on how to deal in different countries, different regions. But I know that that these global binding rules exist that you could leverage to solve this problem, definitely.
Right, right, okay. Because why I'm asking this, because, you know, I work for a company which is AI-based named Shafiqi Pro. We provide ID verification services to it. So while I'm talking with different clients, right? So there's always a hurdle, which is the compliant thing, right? So whenever I'm saying, okay, you can adopt my system and this is the thing, they're liking it, they're loving it, but then they're gonna say, okay, our regulator is saying this, and I'm not clueless how I'm gonna do that because I'm just the ID verification company, you know? So it seems challenge for us that, like, while, like, since you're in Europe, right? So, you know, in Germany, it is mandatory to have the video KYC, right? So all we can do is can provide you with a video KYC tool, right? So that's the one way to fulfill the requirements of Germany's regulator. But on the other end, when they comes up with the tiny things that your data cannot go from there, I mean, we have to, you know, so stuff like that. So what I was wondering, like, we are GDPR compliant as well, and our servers are in Germany as well. So what is the best way to provide the ID verification with a compliant, making sure that we are fulfilling the compliant requirements as well?
Oh, that's such a specific question. To be honest, I don't know the exact answer to it, because I think it really depends per country.
Yeah.
This legislation, this is not GDPR legislation anymore, I believe. So this is the financial regulation. What kind of edification should you execute in order to determine if someone is actually who he or she says they are? And I don't think that's specifically in relation to GDPR. I think that's more like the general financial regulations that I think differ per country, to be honest. But I don't know the exact details on this because it's quite specific. I'm happy to take it offline and do some Googling, researching for you, and ask maybe someone here internally to get the answer, because I don't, at this moment, don't know the exact answer to it, other than I think it would be more a financial requirement than an actual GDPR requirement, to be honest.
Right, okay.
But I'm not sure. This is a bit outside of my my reach.
Maybe I can just add to that, Frank. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's more of a financial regulatory kind of requirement rather than a GDPR. So what you will have to do, Ali, is you'll have to ensure that you're complying with the financial regulatory requirements of the different jurisdictions that you plan to operate in simultaneously.
Right, okay. Thanks, Yasmeen. And could you please more elaborate on the Bahrain's compliance requirements? Like, if we want to provide the ID verification services in your country, so what should be the compliance requirement we should adopt to provide these services?
So our compliance requirements will be on a case-by-case basis, of course, and I'm not in a position to speak about them because I don't represent the compliance directorate. But what we can do is I do urge you to, for example, go through our website, go through our rule books, and they provide you with a holistic kind of comprehensive view of what our requirements are in general.
Right, perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Yasmeen. You guys can go ahead now.
Thank you so much, everybody. Maisa, I want to just direct it back to you just to make sure that we also cover any items from your end before we get to the top of the hour.
Thank you, Abe, and thank you, everybody. We have a couple of more questions, but I think we probably have time for one more. So I would like to direct the question to our Chief Risk Officer, and then probably I'll ask the same from our CIO as well. So I'll start by asking Mr. Shafiqi Fahim. About, what are the anticipated changes for the business and operating model after adopting the credit scoring solution? What do you think that will change in the way we operate or the business model that we have? Fahim, over to you.
I think definitely the change in the model is going to be less human interaction. There's going to be less requirement on sort of maker checker activities that are happening at the manual end. The intent is for these to be automated. I think we are looking definitely at less activities when it goes to portfolio management. Again, we would expect some sort of machine tooling, AI sort of solution that's going to be taking care of that. Ultimately, I think it means that we're going to be having, I think it means that we're going to be having less people sort of doing manual work, so to speak, and a lot more, less people, but more people who are more involved in the analytics and the data side of actually interpreting the results and trying to see how that should be used to get greater insight into our customers' behavior.
Yeah, indeed. Osama, from your perspective, please, can you address the anticipated changes?
Yeah, we are going to introduce more complex products in the coming few months, and getting a smart credit scoring tool will definitely simplify the customer experience and make the customer journey more comfortable and efficient for customers and also for ourselves. For sure, working on such a project will help us again to shift our focus to customer analytics, and at the end it will benefit both customers and BisB.
Thank you. I guess we're just gonna have, it's drawing to end. The time is just, we cannot take more question, I guess. So I guess it's just been really a great discussion, and I would like to thank you, everybody. We are super excited as we forge a new banking experience to our consumers, partnering with the competitive fintechs. As we draw this session to an end, we would like to thank you all participants and the panelists. Please monitor the FinGalaxy website for the latest updates and development for this competition. Thank you all. Have a good evening.